Welcome to She Loves the Grid, where we discuss all things F1. Whether it's happening on the track, in the paddock, or beyond the grid, we'll talk about it all. Well, hello, Diane, and welcome back, everyone. I'm Claire.
I'm Diane.
Welcome
Welcome.
to She Loves the Grid.
Yay, we just finished the Miami race. Oy, I'm exhausted. I don't know how it wasn't even that exciting, but yeah, I'm tired.
I know it was interesting. I was expecting, I don't know, well, when we get to the race, like we were saying, we're kind of getting prepped.
Yeah.
Just
So, why
no,
don't you show
just
us
not
what
much.
you
Oh, yeah.
do?
Look what I finished. How was
Okay,
my week? How was my week? I stayed up all night for last because I get obsessive. And look what I finished.
that is, look how big that is. If you're not watching us on YouTube, go to our YouTube page, subscribe. You will see Claire finish the McLaren car that we've talked about a few times.
And
And
my
it
McLaren
is
Lego car.
huge.
It's massive. I think it's 1,299 pieces. I think it is something like that.
Wow. They should have just thrown one more piece in there. Make
I
it
know,
an
right?
even 13, or not even, but a 1300s. Yeah.
It would be even because the engine is
How,
even.
how long did it
Yeah.
take you?
I estimate it took me about 10 hours because I started after work, um, which for me is around midnight my time.
Yeah.
And I because I worked through the night. I got done around noon, but I will admit I didn't pay attention to one part that I was trying to be nice and about how I laid out my parts.
Yeah.
Since I've got a small desk space, and I didn't empty out all the bags in bag one because there's little bags inside, and I put the wrong size gear in the middle. When I got to one part, I realized, oh, this is too big of a gear. Oh, it needed to go there. That's why that part was loose. So I had to disassemble it and reassemble it.
Oh, no.
So I don't count that redo time. And then I took a little break a little later on to get something to eat, like some breakfast and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
true assembly time was about 10 hours.
Wow. It's the worst when you realize you've already used a part that didn't need to be where it is.
Yeah, and at the end,
Like
I
everything.
realized when I was making the bin in the back, because it's really hard in the book to tell the colors sometimes,
Yeah.
that I had used a part here in black, that there was an exact same one that's gray. Luckily, it wasn't too far in, and I was able to quickly switch the parts out. It was inside this orange section up underneath. So I was able to pull it off, swap the black for the gray, and get that. Funny enough, at one point, it had something look like it was purple, and I'm like, there are no purple parts, but it was like a faded print page, and it was
Oh,
actually supposed to be blue. There's no purple parts of this thing. Um, yeah, it's really fascinating. The book is a really nice book, and it shows like the car that it's modeled off of.
oh,
Um, so it's really fascinating. I love like the side mirrors, and you can see the car, the seat. You can see all of the steering wheel, and then when you turn the steering wheel, the front wheels actually move.
oh, that's cool. It turns the wheels.
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah, it's really, and it's got like the suspension of the wheels and everything. It's really fascinating, the design and how they did everything. So,
I love
um,
it. Well, you definitely beat us. I think we did miss a part, or we put a part in incorrectly. We just are kind of like
But I
ignoring.
was really shocked, and a lot of the big sets, the Lego company is really good about taking I don't have the official word, the puller apart tool, and
Yes.
putting in there. And
Yeah.
he did not have it in this box, and I needed it, and luckily I have several of them, and so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna pull some stuff because, like I said, I think maybe because this is considered a technique set. Um,
Oh yeah.
but
Technics.
yeah, it was fun. But anyway, that's enough of
It
that.
looks
How was
great.
your week? That was
It was
the cap of my week. Who cares about the rest of it? I
good.
spent hours playing with my Legos, my Lego bricks, so I'm happy.
But it looks cool. Yeah, my week was good. Just lots of kind of running around. But my mom and I went down to the art museum this week and saw some great, beautiful art pieces. And then we happened to find this great Italian restaurant just within walking distance of there. So went down and we got to meet the owner. The owner and his family are all from Italy. They all speak Italian behind. So I had to ask them, are you do you like Formula One? And they said yes. And I said, are you Ferrari fans? Because hello, Italy, that's it. It's kind of a religion there. And he said yes. He's like, but there's not a lot to be excited about with Ferrari lately. I'm like,
It was
yeah,
pretty exciting this weekend for them. So
yeah,
kind of
we
looks.
got there. We got
I have
there.
to tell you, I was telling you some of those pictures of you and your mom at the museum was giving me some good Ferris Bueller day off vibes, you know.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. For sure. We might go back sooner than we planned, but yeah, it'll be fun. It was a good week. It was a very good week. So,
Let's do some
as
team.
was Miami, apparently.
Well, let's do some team updates. Let's get through some craziness for this week before the race, and then
Yeah.
get into the race. And
I mean, there was a lot happening. I think just like in Australia, there was a lot happening before the race, right? So you had like Joe and Valtteri were at the Marlins. I think it was a Marlins game. Joe threw out his first pitch. I think he said it's like the first time he's like, it can't be the first time he's thrown a ball, but it was like the first time he threw out a first pitch or something. I don't know. But that looked like so much fun. Lewis did a basketball game. I think that was sponsored by maybe the watch company that sponsors them. Looked like a blast. Lots of little kids. So we talked last week about how all the team hospitality tents were on the football field for the Miami Dolphins, and so they set up kind of in the open area a little combine. So if you don't know American football, they have all these little drills that they do, running, kind of swerving in and out of
for agility and stuff.
yes, for agility. And so I think all of the drivers did that, and they were scoring them as far as timing goes. And they had to throw a ball and get it into one of three spots in this net. And Pierre Gasly ended up winning that. So I think Nick DeVries was second, but it was kind of fun on the scoreboard in there. They had the rankings of who was where, but it just looked like they were all having so much fun with all of that. And then what else? We had Danny Ricciardo throwing Yuki off of a boat.
Yeah, that video. Oh my gosh! If you haven't seen it, go check it out. They have it on. Well, the combine's on the Miami Dolphins
Yes, the
Instagram
Dolphins.
page, but the Danny Ricciardo, they've got it up. F1 shared it. It's out on YouTube too. It's poor Yuki.
I know, poor Yuki. I was like, do not mess with my Yuki. But I mean, it's kind of funny. So, but I guess Yuki's scared of sharks, and Danny got him to kind of stand up on the edge of the boat and was like trying to get him like, look over there. If you stand up here, you can look on the horizon. And then they both went in the water. He kind of tackled them.
Yeah, at least when he told me first about he pushed him, but at least he didn't just push him, and he just grabbed him and goes in with him. So
yeah, he grabbed him and went in with him. And then they did have also like these little mini boats that they did a race. Him and Danny and Yuki did a little race on the water. And I need to finish watching that video, but that looked amazing. I'm trying to think like what else. Everybody
like little kids.
Special. What's that?
They're like little kids
They
having
are.
a good time playing.
But I love it. I think that's awesome. I think everybody had special helmets. We put them up on our social media, but I loved it. All pinks and teals and, like just fun. Palm
kind
trees.
of Miami Vice theme for people who are old enough to remember Miami Vice.
Definitely Miami Vice. And then celebrities everywhere, right? So there were some that were kind of there all week. Like,
oh my gosh.
Tons of Miami Dolphins were there all week, like Tua, Tyreek Hill, who I love. He's a wide receiver. He was decked out in an Alpine race, suit. It looked like he was going to jump in the car. that looked good. He was on Pierre's, I think it was for FP3 maybe, on Pierre's radio, just wishing him good luck. Who else? Oh, today was like my heaven. You had LL Cool J. You had, Roger Federer was there. But as far as my hip hop musicians, Queen Latifah was there. Ludacris. I love me some Luda. Who else was there? The Jonas Brothers. They're not hip hop, but Jonas Brothers. will.i.am. He directed the.
I love it directing the orchestra.
Yeah, that was incredible. So we can talk about that in a second, but like who else? Lindsey Vonn was there. Roger Federer, ASAP Rocky. oh my gosh, Michelle Rodriguez, Vin Diesel. I think he was there kind of all week, so he was totally into it. The Williams sisters, both Venus and Serena, were both there. Tom Cruise, Dak Prescott, C.D. Lamb. So I'm sure there was tons more that I didn't even capture, but it was celebrity central. Holy
Oh yeah.
moly. That was insane. Absolutely crazy. And then today, so if you follow AlphaTauri on social media, every race week, they ask for ideas for their garage playlist for the weekend. And I put stuff in sometimes, sometimes not. But this week we did. And it's kind of been our theme because starting on Monday, when I posted our race week stuff, I used Miami by Will Smith. And so it was one of three songs that I suggested to AlphaTauri, and we made their garage playlist this week. So I got a big kick out of that. I thought that
Yeah,
was
so exciting. So
yeah,
thank you, AlphaTauri, for mentioning us because we're so excited
yeah.
to try to get our name out there and get, followers, of course, but it was mainly because we want to just keep educating people. So it's so cool to be recognized by AlphaTauri. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, we know
And
I
that's
love
one of my favorite songs too.
I do love that song, and it was perfect
No,
for this week, and we weren't obviously the only people using it, so
no.
like, but
How can you not going to Miami, right? You
oh,
just how
it's
can you
the
not?
theme song for Miami. It's crazy. But yeah, so I mean, crazy stuff happening all week. Just so much fun. Wish we could be there, but maybe next year. But otherwise, like team wise, we had little bits of stuff. Mercedes, Toto Lewis says they're 100% committed to signing Lewis. As we talked about last week, Charles Leclerc was having to kind of answer questions about whether or not he was talking to Mercedes. So I don't know if Toto felt like he needed to come out.
That
and
would, yeah, that would be interesting to have. I can't imagine Charles leaving Ferrari though,
no, and I
but
can't imagine Lewis necessarily away from Mercedes after all these years. They just go together, right? So
yeah.
Lewis and um, who are they? Mercedes. My brain.
Mercedes. It's going to be interesting, though. I'm really looking forward to Mercedes in coming up to Imola, though, because Hamilton was saying that that they're going to have these upgrades for Imola, and watching this week and even the race, I was a little disappointed how it started out, but they were pushing on, and I showed some promise both cars, especially Russell.
Yeah,
Um, so if they're really getting upgrades, if there's really something big happening, I don't know how big, but the
yeah.
inference is such
It's
that I,
it's
I want to. I want to see it. I want to see it. I'm not expecting huge things, but I'm expecting at least something significant.
yeah. Well, it is allegedly the side pods that we've been hearing about since kind of almost the beginning of the season. That's what's supposed to be coming in Imola, which would be a very big change and could, bring them that little bit of time that they're missing that can put them again, more towards the front fighting with the Aston Martins and, maybe the Ferraris and definitely the Red Bulls. So we shall see. But I know from what I believe F1 said that all of the Mercedes powered cars, so that's Aston Martin, Mercedes, Williams, McLaren, got new battery packs and control electronics. And I think that's kind of their allotment for the season. So we're getting closer and closer to people taking grid drops for races where people are
Well, but
using
even
their stuff.
yeah, and even Red Bull had some changes that said that they might have some later in the year too. So it's to
Yeah.
be so early in the season and so few races, it's going to be interesting how many teams and Red Bulls included because of different switch outs and whatnot that they're going to end up with penalties, which makes me ponder. Between the cost cap changes and there's been talks about how the FAI needs to get better about how fairly they are about other, the regular penalties, these kinds of things with all this equipment switch out. Did cost cap do something that I wonder did it have some kind of impact to this, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how often I just haven't been in the in the sport so long, but how often is it that by race 5 you have so many teams that are facing you know these kinds of like we used up all of our swaps, and it's across multiple teams, right? So
Yeah.
could the cost cap have some kind of impact to that because they didn't have enough time to spend refining something or fixing something that cut corners or whatnot, and it's going across so many different teams? Is that something that the FIA or the teams might ask the FIA to increase the limit or,
Yeah.
something like that?
I know that they did, and I should have written this down when I heard it, but I want to say like a week or two ago, the FAA did increase the limit of some parts for this season. I think it was for this season because we were running into that. As far as like, is this as many or as quickly as teams have used up their allotted, or very close to their allotted parts? I don't know, but it does seem like we've got quite a few that are going to start being on that bubble. And like you said, Max, it was Max, I think, that got a new gearbox. So that's his third of four that are allowed for this season. So we can look into a little bit more which ones the FAA like said, okay, we'll have, because the gearbox, it might be one of them. So it might have been three, now it's four. We'll double check that and talk about that next week a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely going to have an impact.
Yeah,
Or
it'll be
maybe
interesting. It'll be something neat to track across all the parts that have limits. How many, which drivers traded out each one just to kind of throughout the year to see how it goes, and then see how it's been in previous years. All of numbers. That'll be interesting to see that.
Yeah, I think so too. And then another thing about Red Bull that we talked about in the past is the livery design for the American races. They were going to have fans, open it up to fans. We showed some a couple weeks ago, some of the, more creative ones, I think is what they said. And then was it Tuesday or Wednesday? They showed off the livery for Miami. And I think there was a collective yawn across like the F1 world because all the comments and stuff, I was at dinner, out to dinner, and I kept watching my phone for 4:30, and I got on. I was like, what? That's it? Like that is it. And I think it was the same thing what I was seeing online. But I will say, and this might be an unpopular view, I don't know, but I did like it on the track. I think on the track it looked pretty sharp, but I don't know if it's the way the lines went and how it kind of mimicked maybe sort of a wave, but I actually liked it. And at the very end, and we'll talk about this later, but the end of this race, when you had the two Red Bulls fighting each other in the last couple laps, I was like, that looks so sharp. It looks really good. So I mean, maybe they knew what they were doing. I don't know.
Maybe.
Less paint. That is from the comments. All of the other designs that had like the palm trees and the cute little SpongeBob looking, under the sea, people are saying it's too much paint. It starts to weigh on the car, and they're not going to do that. So something very simple like these 3 lines with, a color, thinner lines. That's what they're going to be looking for. So heads up if you're thinking about applying or submitting artwork for Austin or Las Vegas. There you go. Simple is best.
Simple is best.
Simple
that makes sense. Well, if we're talking about other parts and with Ferrari, and I think you're right that they both got more parts, right, for this one.
Yeah, I think they both got diffusers and they both got new floors. So, and I didn't hear anything after Charles' crash in qualifying.
I didn't either.
I didn't hear anything about him having to take any new. He certainly didn't have a grid drop or anything. So,
we don't have this. We don't have this in our notes, but didn't Haas end up having to switch out their floor too?
Did they switch?
Was it them? I thought there was somebody else that in one of the practices messed it up. They're like, oh well, luckily they brought 3 floors, one for each driver and an extra.
It was Nico. Yep. Yeah. It was Nico, and they had 3 floors, and he really his car. So I think K-Mag didn't even have the new floor on his car yet. Sometimes teams will do that where they'll put a new part on one car, and that way they can get data off of that while the other car uses their usual setup, and they can get data off of that car. And he crashed and had the new floor, and fortunately they did have more. So
yeah, it just dawned on me when you said the Ferrari. It's like, oh yeah, there was another team because they brought 3, and that's the new. People they think about it, they had to think of what parts they could ship over to the US, it's a little different in logistics in Europe because they could ship something if they needed to Friday to Saturday, or even they really needed to Saturday to Sunday. But to get it overseas that quickly would be
Yeah.
much harder logistically to get some
Yeah.
apart.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank goodness they had what they needed, but
Just think about
thank
how they
goodness.
could do all that. That's crazy.
Yeah. And then they weren't I guess I should say F1 wasn't the only race in town. There was F1 Academy. They weren't in Miami, but they were in Valencia, Spain. Second race in a row for them. And then the way they do their format is different. So they actually have three separate races. And again, if you're on our YouTube, you can see the three different winners. So Marta Garcia won the third race. And then Hamda, I don't know how to say her last name, Al Quibas.
Alcabasi,
That's
Alcabasa.
that's how I would say. I think she won the first race, and then Bianca Bustamante won the second one. And both Marta and Bianca are from Prima, so they're from the same team. And it looked like the few little clips that I've seen, because they're not airing the full races just yet, but they are showing little clips, and it definitely looked pretty good. But you know what I thought was pretty darn awesome was um, Hamda. I hope I'm saying that right, and please forgive me if I'm not. But she is like 75 days ago, she had a crash in another race, broke her hand. I think it was like right around her wrist area, but clean, like bad. 4-hour surgery, like I don't even remember what it was. 10 pins, a
Hmm.
titanium plate, the whole 9 yards. And there, 75 days later, she's in a car and winning her first F1 Academy race. So I think that's pretty damn impressive.
And that just makes my ankle hurt because you know me, I've got my plate and pins in my ankle. I just, oh my gosh,
How do they do it? Like, I don't know how they do it, because again, just like
so
we talked about
much.
Lance, like yes, you're on
Yeah,
the steering wheel, and their cars are different than the F1 cars, but still, it's like that is got to be just the comeback impressive, so impressive. And we also found out this week, which I was super excited about, and I know you were too, Claire, because you love Reese Witherspoon, but her production company, which I thought she sold, but maybe not, Hello Sunshine, they did announce they are going to be doing a docu-series on F1 Academy. So it's going to be kind of like Drive to Survive. It sounds like they're going to follow them, the personal stories, the racing, all of that. I don't know when it starts. I highly doubt that they've already started for this year. So maybe it's something in the works when F1 Academy follows more of the F1 schedule. But I just think that's really exciting, because that's the kind of exposure that they need. There's been a lot of
absolutely.
fussing about them not having broadcasting. There's not live, video or feeds of.
Well, we talked about their president was not at their race and at the F1 race this weekend, which is
Yeah, Susie Wolf
a little
was in
weird.
Miami. She wasn't at the race. So there's been a lot of talk about that, and people are very excited. Which that's where I take the positives from, is that if people are that upset about it, which I fully understand, like please stop underestimating women's sports and the interest in watching women's sports. Um, but if people are that, like, I don't know, it means that people want to watch. And so I think a show very similar format to Drive to Survive for F1 Academy is going to be great. It's going to really set them up to be successful, hopefully in the long run. Long term.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I'm excited for it. And
Yeah.
Reese Witherspoon, I think she's such a great actress and just person in general. So I think it's going to be what she'll be able to pull off.
Yeah. I'm
In her
excited.
company.
So as we get more info, we'll keep you posted for sure.
All right. Well, let's get into the actual race this
Yeah.
week, and it's been interesting. I mean, practice. Yeah, there's just so many unknowns because this is only the second time they've done in Miami. I always think it's interesting because they talk about it's in a parking lot, but the way it's surfaced and it's considered a street race, but it's really not in the streets. I mean, it's a track that's been laid down for this purpose. If you really look at it, because I kept really paying attention to the cameras out, they're flying over and whatnot. I mean, this is a track laid down specifically for this. It's not a permanent track, but it's also not actual streets that people are driving on normally
Yeah.
either, like Monaco or Azerbaijan either. I mean, it's like a hybrid. I would consider it more of a hybrid,
Yeah.
because they've paved it specifically for this, and then they're going to rip all that crap out and turn it back into a parking lot when it's done. So,
Yeah, I don't know if they rip it out. I mean, obviously the walls and all that kind of stuff, but maybe they just go back in and start painting the parking lines. But yeah, it's like a semi-permanent, kind of like Australia, which was, part park and, then there was Park Road. So, yeah, I think people didn't know what to expect. And because they resurfaced it this year over last year, there was a lot of slipping and sliding. Like, to me, that's all that I could think about during the practice, especially the
uh-huh.
first practice, was just, it was like everywhere. And so I'm sure that the drivers last outing, they had one practice because of the new sprint format, but I'm sure they were happy this time to have three practices to try to figure stuff out, because there was no grip, especially at the beginning. Um, and then by FP3, there was a lot more grip, and there was a lot more rubber being laid down. But yeah, it was kind of crazy um, how much
And there's a
slipping.
lot of talk with the commentators about how none of the practices were at the actual time of the race, which I thought was interesting too, that the times were so staggered,
Yeah,
they weren't actually getting time to feel the tires out at the time of day, at similar humidity, at similar temperatures, similar light, all of that.
yeah,
So it was just odd all the way around.
yeah. That, I mean, I feel like that happens because I heard that and I started thinking, well, yeah, because one thing, FP2 was definitely not at any kind of time where for qualifying or the race, um, and so it was kind of like, what kind of data are they going to get from FP2? But it was the same way in Austin. I think the FP2 was like at 5 p.m. Um, Usually it seems like FP1 is the one that will at least give you is at the same time as qualifying. But yeah, it it was kind of interesting. Um, the other thing I thought was interesting when they were pulling back just during practice, and especially on Friday, was how empty the stands were. I was kind of like, what? Why? If you're spending that much money, and these tickets for Miami were very expensive, why are you not going to everything? Like, maybe it's
Right?
just me, but it's, and you might hate me for this in Barcelona, but we are there open to close. It's like when
Oh.
I go to Disneyland, we're there with the gates open, and we are not leaving until after the fireworks and everything else. So it is open to close, and that's how it's going to be when we do Barcelona in a few weeks. And I'm
Oh,
watching
absolutely.
everything. So for sure, Miami a little bit of a different monster. Las Vegas might be the same way, but yeah, kind of crazy on that part. But I think in general, just all the practices seem kind of weird to me. Just there's a lot of complaining, a lot of slipping around. Like,
Yeah, and it was interesting, and it was a little different each day. I thought it was interesting to hear them keep talking about like dust in the pits. And it's like, is that dust or is that sand? Because I lived in Florida for 8 years, most recently, and then years before that. And my whole family has been there since 1987. So, in various stages toward the beach and away from the beach. And it's blowing sand. I mean, it's sand. It's sand. It's just Florida's sand. Um, but I find it just interesting between that and then of course it rained the night before the race. And of course we're like, well, that washed all the rubber off. And I guess
yeah,
there was videos showing like water near one of the Aston Martin areas. It's just,
yeah,
oh my gosh. And it was supposed to potentially rain during the race today. And then they were
stayed
talking about
away.
the wind messing up FP3 yesterday and causing, all the different issues. But then there was lots of wind today. In fact, during part of the race, they actually showed the wind and the effect on the race and the direction, but then it seemed to not have an effect. So
Yeah,
this kind
it
of
is.
was like it was all over the place. It's like
It really was.
was supposed to affect didn't affect them. Things that weren't supposed to affect them affected them. And it was very confusing.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I think you and I talked this morning, and we were saying, like, we were looking at the weather. It was hot, humid. It rained last night, so wiped off all of the grip
And windy,
rubber that was down. And what else was it? Oh, the wind. And
windy.
yeah, and we were like, "Ooh, this is going to be." Or maybe it was more me, but I was like, "This is going to be good." Like, there's going to be, probably
I
people
was
were
expecting
standing.
yellow flags, at least one red flag.
Yeah, I figured at least some yellows. People were going to be slipping and sliding, and none of. I mean, there was a little bit here and there, but not. I don't think a lot at all. They
No,
didn't.
we had it in qualifying and in practice.
Yeah,
So I guess we should talk about that. I mean, practice, we just talked about that. There wasn't a lot of data in it, but then, I don't know, I guess we could go into qualifying.
yeah. Qualifying. I mean, the thing with qualifying, and I think you had said this morning when we talked, was because the teams were waiting, they knew each session. You wanted to be like, you wanted to get that last lap in at the very, very end because you wanted more rubber to be down. You wanted more grip on the track so you could get out there and just push it the way, you know, give it your all, just everything. So they knew that that's what was going to happen. So there were times for sure where it was like everybody's in the pits. Maybe like 3 or 4 people were on the tracks. But in Q1, that last, I think it was last 3 minutes, it just seemed that bottom 5 kept, like, people were going in and out, in and out. Like, oh, they jumped up to 5th, and then they jumped up. Now people are.
I was having so much anxiety because at one point you're like, why are all the top teams in the bottom 5? And then all of a sudden, choose, they're all shooting up. I'm like, oh, you guys are giving me a heart attack. I mean, I get what you're trying to do, but could you just be out there and do a couple of good runs just on
Yeah,
that? I mean, you got so much time in Q1. Just run the
yeah,
car. Get
yeah.
you lay some rubber out there. Put
Right.
everybody contribute and stop giving me a heart attack. Well, because I mean, I get the strategy, but then again, you could have a yellow flag, you could have a red flag, and then you're screwed.
Yep. Yep.
And look what happened,
Yep.
because it happened in Q2. It happened. I mean, what do we
Q3.
have? We had major people out.
Yeah, major people. But in Q1, like, I think the stuff that stood out to me, both Haas's making it fairly easily to Q2, both Mercedes barely making it into Q2. Like you said, they were some of those that were at the bottom until the very last second. Bottas made it, both Alpines made it, both McLarens were out. Sargent starting last in his home race, which that was sad.
I know.
Really sad, and it just gets worse. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so yeah, but out in Q1, Stroll. Nobody expected Stroll to be out in Q1. That's like last year's Aston Martin and Stroll. He was always, not always, but he was out often in Q1. Yuki out, Piastri out, Norris out, and Sargent out in Q1. Craziness. Q2, I feel somewhat uneventful until we saw who went out in Q2.
Yeah.
Big name. And you were ahead of me, so we were texting. And
I know, and I would wait. I'm just like, and then you respond. I'm like, I know.
but okay, so in Q2, we'll say who's out: De Vries, Hulkenberg, Albon, Zhou, and Hamilton. And when I looked at my phone, all she sent me was like 3 exclamation points. And then I saw what happened, that Hamilton was out, and I was like, oh, that's what that's for.
That's what that was for. It's like, I was just like, I can't say anything because I think we figured out I'm like, I don't know, 8 to 10 seconds ahead of you or something like that.
Which is weird because we're both watching F1 TV, but like, it's very bizarre. But Hamilton, and he and George have been complaining a lot during practice and all that kind of stuff. Just, they were not happy with their cars at all. And especially Hamilton in the car, out of the car, he was just not shy about saying how unhappy he was. But it was still kind of surprising. And then, like you said, the wind picked up a little bit, right? Like the wind.
And then all those drivers just rested on their laurels, like, I'm going to just do my fast run here at the end, not a big deal. And then Charles, whoosh, right into the wall.
All those drivers, they had all been in the pits. I think all of them were in the pits. And then they all
Mhm.
came out at the same time. They're all on their out lap. I think Charles was maybe the first one to start his, or one of the first ones to start his flyer. And like you said, 1.5 minutes left. He spins same place as the day before because
Yep.
and right into the wall. So
I may or may not have laughed hysterically that
don't
a few
laugh at
of those
Charles.
people, not at Charles, at the people who got stuck below and lower in the start
Oh
because
yeah.
they didn't try harder.
Yeah, I know. So we ended because of that. We did end up with a very like I call it a topsy turvy like top 10. We had 6 different teams represented in the top 6. Checo, King of the Streets, he's on pole. Then Alonso and Sainz are an all Hispanic top 3. Which,
Yeah, they mentioned that in Miami, which just predominantly speak
yes.
Spanish, that the top 3 were all speaking Spanish.
Yes,
Awesome.
and I was not mad about that at all. That was a great photo. And then you had
literally
K-Mag.
the top 3 that I wanted to win. So I was hoping that would be the 3 that won, not that order, which I knew wasn't going to happen. But I had hopes. I had hopes. I had such high hopes.
Same. I was hoping that those 3 would be in there. I wanted that podium so badly, so badly. It was in my heart. But K-Mag completely out of position, finishing in 4th place. Max in 9th. Like what else? Who else? It was just so bizarre. Like it was
so
crazy.
bizarre.
I mean, you don't have to. You have to look, but just the ending. Nope. There's a minute and a half left. We're calling it done. Red flag. So sad. Too bad you did to get your.
I was kind of. I mean, I don't know enough to know if that's how it normally is, but I kind of didn't expect that. I didn't expect them to just be like, "Okay, we're done."
I think it was close enough, and probably they just thought a minute and a half. All the cars are going to have to do another out lap. I don't know. They're probably just like, screw it. Like we're not gonna.
Well, you had Gasly up there. That's what it was. Gasly was in 5th.
Yes. Okay. And just kind of
P5.
Sort of jumping ahead to our F1 fantasy team. I took Gasly off one of my teams, and then he finished in 5th for qualifying. And I think it worked out for me in the end after the race. But I was like,
well, and in the top 10, Bottas and Max did not have times, and so they ended up in 9th and 10th.
Oh, that's right. They had no times because I know Max pulled out of his flyer because he was slipping, a couple times, and he was like, forget it. I don't know what was going on with Bottas, but that's right. They didn't even have times in Q3. Woo!
Yeah.
Ay. Craziness.
I think what's interesting is that the ones that were in the top 10, and then how they finished, the ones that were started in the top 10, how they finished in the top 10 is actually, we'll have to talk about that when we get to the race. I'm going to take care of that because that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So let's talk about the race. Like, first of all, the intro where they introduced all of the drivers, freaking LL Cool J on the mic. You have will.i.am directing strings and brass and like.
Yeah, that was awesome.
It was
my only thing was, and it's just the way that my rub was, I would have liked them to introduce them in reverse order based on the starting grid.
Oh yeah, and they did it based on the points, the driver championship, which I didn't mind. I mean, I get why you would want to see it as the grid because like that's where it just mentally you're like, okay, who's in?
Yeah, because this is the lineup. This is the lineup for today. This is for Miami. They did this for Miami. This was a Miami thing, and this is where they're lining up for Miami. Give a little bit of reward for the people who worked so hard or did not work so hard to get in the pace that they were,
Yeah. No, I loved it. I felt like Esteban's intro was a little weird because I think he came, I don't know if he was right after Pierre, but he was somewhere close to Pierre. And the intro was something, oh yeah, he must have been right after Pierre because I think LL said something to the effect of, Pierre's buddy, childhood friend, then like enemy.
Well, then it was like then teammates, then rivals, then teammates again, or something like that.
Yeah, it was so. I was like, what? Like that is poor Esteban. If clearly they didn't have Alpine read that ahead of time, but I would have been like, okay, no, I think we can find something else to talk about. Like, I just thought that was so weird. But anyways, yeah, with the rain and everything else, we thought we were going to have a much crazier race than we did. But oh my goodness, towards the beginning, one of the things that like stood out to me, and I think I actually stood up off my couch, was Kevin Magnussen and Max passing Charles down the straight. Like poor Charles had just passed Magnussen, and here they come down the straight, and on either side, there go Magnussen and Verstappen, right?
What was it like? If you, a sense of like, well, here's the meat in the sandwich. I was like, these commentators.
It was awful. And like words I never thought I would say, but one of the biggest battles of the race was Magnussen and Leclerc. They were going back and forth.
Like, and at one, it was like Leclerc goes by, and Magnussen's like, oh no, like so many times.
Next turn, and first of all, like I like Haas, I like K Mag, I love the fight. Like he was not like okay, so he started in 4th and dropped down to where did he finish? Like 10th, I think. I think he got that last point.
Yeah, he got 10th.
But I just thought, good for you. At the same time, like I was conflicted. Don't mess with my Ferrari, but also like, good for you for fighting and acting like, no, I belong up here. My car is good enough, and I belong up here today. So, yeah, but still, words I never thought I'd say. Charles Leclerc, Magnussen, craziness. But also on the first lap, DeVries. Oh, DeVries. I don't even know. He is definitely, I mean, first of all, nice thirst trap that he posted earlier this week with his like 8-pack abs. But like we said last time,
he just keeps revealing all these parts of the body that Diane's like, oh, look at those thighs. Oh, look at those abs. I'm waiting for the next one.
You can't help but notice. Like, what else do we need to see? Like, oh my goodness. Anyways, now I'm like sidetracked. But last week I said I was worried about him mentally because he has just not had the year that we thought he was going to have. He is kind of like the Nicholas Latifi of this year. But on that first lap, he goes right into the back of Lando. And I need to go back and watch it to see if I can see what happened. But Lando had to pit, and Lando never recovered. And the McLarens did not look good in this race. After last race, Azerbaijan, they looked pretty good. We're like, woo, we weren't even expecting to see results from the upgrades. We're going to see those more in Miami. Nope. They finished towards the bottom. And I'm sure for Lando, having to pit, he needed a new wing. They put that on, front wing. I just don't think they're recovering.
McLaren ended up with the 17th and 19th.
Yeah. And Piastri, no. He was 19th.
And they started 16th and 19th, and they ended 17th and 19th.
Yeah, but I will say, like, when the lights first went out, like, I think that Lando was making moves. Like, he was gunning it, got up, and then that's how he was in front of DeVries. And then I think they were braking for a turn. There was a whole bunch of cars. I need to go back and watch, but right into the back of them. And I think that was not great. Also, I'm kind of over Max Verstappen and the Red Bulls.
Oh yeah, I know the max cap was a few years ago.
The max
cap, yeah, whatever. Sorry, the cost cap was a couple of years ago. But all of it, and I'm still learning. So they keep building on technology and what they do, right? There's still some build up, right?
Yeah.
And it's obvious that they are so far ahead of all the other teams. I felt if the FIA really wanted to put some oomph into keeping teams from not going over the cost cap, instead of just fining them and the money going to the FIA, fine it and give it to all the other teams as freebies that they can just spend freely and not impact their cost cap, right? So if they have a $7 million fine, well, make it a $9 million fine, give 1 million to each of the teams, and tell them that's a freebie. You can just spend it.
Yeah.
It's 50% of how much they went over. And then it doesn't impact them. It gives them the ability to raise up a little bit and maybe tighten that gap a little bit,
Yeah.
because they're so far ahead. That would be because that would be a greater incentive not to go over, because it's like, oh, wait a minute, if we go over, oh, it's just a fine that goes to the FIA, whatever, we've got the money, especially if you've got that kind of money in your team. But what kind of incentive is it to not, if you're like, oh, if we go over, we have to give our money to other teams and they get to spend it and it doesn't impact their cost cap and they can get closer to us. Now that's a penalty you're going to think twice about.
That definitely.
You got to make it hurt. If it's a penalty that doesn't hurt you, if you've got cash flowing, that's not a penalty that hurts them. Yeah, I know they get the wind tunnel thing, but how much is that really hurting them? And it's at the end of the season when they're just blowing it out of the water anyway. So it doesn't hurt them.
They're killing everybody. I kind of like your idea. I think you have to pay the other team's money. I like that, but
it doesn't hurt their cost cap.
Right. And we have to give some credit to Adrian Newey, obviously, because I still think he's one of the best designers in the business. So he's got that going on. But for sure, like you said, going over in 2021, they're building on what they've already learned. They do have Adrian Newey, who is like good as gold, and nobody else has that really. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of
you gotta make it hurt.
I mean, he again was 18 seconds ahead of Checo when Max went into the pits at the end. It's like, and he started in 9th place. By lap 15, he was in 2nd place.
Yeah, and it's not like, come on, Alonso's a great driver. It's not like he gets up there and he just goes whatever. Right. He is on there and he's driving and he's fall 16. I think, what was it? He ended up being 26 seconds behind Perez. 26 seconds. So you lost 26 seconds, and it's like, it's not like I'm sure since you knew he was ahead. He's 26 seconds off the top. I'm sorry, that's how they do it here. It's not interval. So he's 26 seconds off the first. So he was 21 seconds off Perez, because Perez is 5 seconds off Verstappen. So 21 seconds. That's still a lot. 21 seconds to be that far back. And I know he's not just resting, just like, oh, well, I've got third. I'm sure part of it, he knew he had third, and it was good. He didn't have to force it to second. But at the same time, when I was seeing him, when Perez passed him, like if you think you've got a chance, but you just see him slowly getting further and further back. In every race I've seen that. Every race I've seen it just slowly creep further and further and further back.
Yeah. They're so dominant. It's so dominant. Like, I did not pick Max for my predictions on the podium because I was wishful thinking. But
yeah, it was wishful thinking. Like I told you,
from 9th place, he was going to go. I knew he was going to.
I knew he was going to do
it. He's a great driver too. I give him that. But the car is so much faster than everybody else. It's crazy.
But could he do that in a Mercedes? In this year's Mercedes? Could he do that in this year's Ferrari? Could he do that in this year's Aston Martin?
Yes.
No. If he were in one of the other cars, he couldn't.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I don't think he could. If two other drivers were in those Red Bulls, I agree with you. I don't think he could.
Yeah. Could two other drivers be as dominant as Red Bulls? Some of them, yes. Carlos, yes. Sainz, yes. Sargent, probably not. Depending on the driver, maybe not as dominant, but better than what they are in the current cars. So, it is a combination of driver and car. So they've got really good drivers, really good cars. But there's just, again, make the cost cap penalty hurt them instead of it being, I've got $1 million, billions of dollars. It's not a big deal. So
I agree. I did love the little battle once Max did come out of the pit, out of the pits. And he was behind Checo.
Yeah.
And I was like, go Checo. I was screaming,
me too.
Go Checo. And I mean, I knew Max on new mediums. I don't even know at that point. I think Checo's hard tires were like 20 laps.
Hard to,
he was going to catch him, but it was a good little battle. I think good for Checo for not giving it up. And I think in the after in the room, the driver room after the race. I think he said something like he could have pushed a little bit more, but it was like, what was the point? Because the tire situation, Max was going to get past him regardless, and so why put himself at risk? Also, but yeah,
The commentators were really like.
Oh, sorry.
I thought it was neat. The commentators were talking about how amazing it is that they can compute how much time and where they would be when he was pitting, because they were like, you're going to be a minus 1.7, and it was a 1.6 when he came out.
Yep. It's crazy. That thing with Bernie Collins, I mentioned last week on the podcast, it's the strategy. That's on Tuesday. So if you haven't had a chance, I think it's Tuesday, 2:00 my time. So anyways, that made me think of it. Is like the stuff that they know down to like the millisecond. What else was I going to tell you about? Oh, Alonso. We've talked about this over and over, just how he is always thinking. He's very aware of what's going on while he's driving the car, always, except for last race, in a podium position. And one of the last laps, he said on his radio, he's commenting. He said, "What position is Lance in?" And that was a really great overtake in turn 1. And they're like, how does he know about the overtake for Lance? Is he watching the video screens as he
on the jumbotrons? He's like, I'm just gonna. Even the last race, we're talking about how he's giving advice. He's so cool. And we've got. I don't know if you posted it, but I took that picture of him because on the podium when he got that trophy and he kissed it, he's just like tap tap, yeah, and just that smile, and he's just so excited to be there,
It's pure joy. It's absolutely pure joy. But I really want to know how he knew about Lance's overtake, because they're in some areas they're going 200 miles an hour. How are you
I'm just driving my F1 car 200 miles an hour, and I'm watching the jumbotron drive by.
Rooting for his teammate. I love him. I absolutely love him. He is incredible. Speaking of my other love, Carlos. So he got a 5-second penalty, which I called it. I said to my mom, I'm like, he was going into that pit hot. So here's my question, and this is what I want to know, is did the team tell him at the last second, box? Because that's the only thing that I can figure, that he came into the pits that hot, locked up both front tires because he was trying to slow down. And my thought is, like, they must have told him a smidge too late. And he did not want to go around again because that will affect the strategy that they're trying to do and all that good stuff. But, like, what? So I was
luckily it did not affect his position.
No, it did not. Because I was watching it. Believe me. I was like, because he when it first happened,
it would have.
He was very close. Pierre was very close behind him. Add 5 seconds, Pierre would have, been in 5th place. But there was a lot of changing. It was Charles and it was Lewis, and there was enough time. So Carlos still finished in 5th. Thank goodness.
Yeah, because I just checked. Just without the 5 seconds, he's 9 seconds behind Russell. So without it, he would still been 4 seconds behind Russell. So
yeah. Well, but it's Hamilton that you want.
Hamilton.
Yeah, Hamilton.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So that was good. So at least he finished in the points. Charles ended up. He moved up. So it wasn't exactly the race we thought from Charles. He had to fight hard.
Yeah, Hamilton. But I'm saying that the 5-second penalty, it kept him from being put behind Hamilton, but it also didn't take him out of 4th. Is what I'm getting at.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That is true. What else? Sargent finished last. So he started last on the grid and he finished dead last plus 1 lap. He was lapped. I hope he had a good week.
Yeah.
He had a lot of attention. It looked like hopefully he had fun. At
least he got to talk too on the intros. I thought everybody was going to talk, ended up being just him and Max. So that was cool.
Yeah. No, I thought that was great. As he should. It's his home race. Welcome everybody. I thought that was great that they did that, but poor Logan, not how he wanted that race to go. And same for Williams. Like Albon, I think finished 13th. they started off fairly, or at least Albon started off fairly well. And
14th.
yeah, just not, again, not the race that they wanted for sure. Anybody else major? Like Botas, he finished, what did he finish? 11th? No,
Yep.
Yuki finished 11th because Yuki with his number 11. I don't know if that's a lucky number in Japan, but
You know what's interesting before we get into like the wrap up? So here's what I thought was interesting. So if you look at the top 10 on the grid, you have Perez, who was pole, and he finished second. You have Alonso, who was second, he finished third. Magnussen was fourth, and he finished still in the top 10. Gasly was fifth, and he finished eighth. Russell was sixth, and he finished fourth. Leclerc was seventh and finished seventh.
oh, okay.
Ocon was eighth and finished ninth. Verstappen was ninth and finished first. And Bottas was 10th, and he finished,
Well,
where did he finish? 13th. So he's the only one in the top 10 who dropped out of the top 10.
oh, interesting. Okay.
And then so of the bottom 10, you had Albon, who was 11th, he dropped down to 14th. Hulkenberg, who was 12th, dropped down to 15th. Hamilton was 13th, and he jumped up to 6th. That's your one that dropped up into the points. And then Joe went from 14th to down to 16th. DeVries 15th to 18th. Norris 16th to 17th. Yuki 17th up to 11.
Nice job, Yuki.
Yeah, 18th up to 12.
That's good.
And then Piastri was 19th, started 19th, and the 19th Sargent started 20th, ended 20th.
Okay. Yeah. So pretty interesting. Did you notice
started to get points? All got points except for one, and then one person who started without points got points.
Nice. I like it. That's a good jump by Yuki too. He's showing me a lot. He needs a seat next year. I did notice another pit wall celebration for Red Bull, which
What's up with that?
Listen, I love a pit wall celebration. They should all do it. I was not happy when they said we're going to start enforcing it, but are they enforcing it? Are they enforcing it? Is Red Bull getting penalized by?
Yeah. And if another team does it and gets penalized, and then Red Bull has it these past 2 times,
yeah, we shall see. We shall see. Okay, beyond the grid stuff. So there was rumors going around that Brad Pitt was going to be driving an F1 car with the other F1 drivers in Silverstone. That's not true. Apparently the car is more like an F2 car. He will be driving it on track by himself. Like, I'm sure they'll use GCI to put stuff in. Who in the world is going to give Brad Pitt?
Wait, they're going to use what?
What?
They're going to use what?
Is it GCI?
Did you just say GCI?
Is that it?
CGI.
Ah, geez, Louise.
My computer friend.
CGI. GCI.
Computer generated graphics.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay. Now I know. You know I can never get the technology names right.
I know, so I have to have fun with you on that one.
That is my thing. But let's talk about one of my favorite times of the week. Oh, and you know what? Who else? Okay, when we talk about this, remind me to talk about Patrick Mahomes. So the first week in Monday is a big week in my life because you have Met Gala Monday on Mondays. My sister and I are on the phone for 2 hours talking about all the dresses and the outfits and all of that stuff. Did it fit the theme? Did it not fit the theme? And there were rumors earlier that day, that Danny Ricciardo was going to be on the carpet. And I was like, I'm not going to believe that just yet. I don't know. I want to see him on the carpet, but I'm not sure. So I think we have a photo. So he wore, look how nice he looks. He wore Tom Brown. Look how nice he looks. Danny Rick, little honey badger, looking so good. I just love it. So Tom Brown actually dressed a whole lot of people. Like, I love me a Janelle Monáe moment. She always brings it. She's right there in the center. If you're on our YouTube, you can see the whole picture. And she had, that was like a whole unveiling. There was a couple different things going on there. But also Jenna Ortega, you got Pusha T, you got Olivia Rodrigo.
I love these looks. You know me. I'm not a dress person. I love Jenna Ortega's. I
I
love
love
that.
that.
I would so wear that. I
And
love
I
that.
also love Tiana's, Tiana Taylor. Like I love that low
Yes.
on the hip, but also the little nod to Karl Lagerfeld because that was the theme this year. And like to me, this you could send this down the runway. This is a cohesive collection. It could go down, and I would be buy all of it, all of it.
Yeah,
So
there's several of those I would actually wear. Like and like I think a couple of them they could switch it from a skirt to pants. I'd even be happier. But
yeah,
yeah, I like those. I like all of those. I love the black, the white. I love the contrast. Yeah, I love the geometric. Oh
yes.
yeah, I love it.
Yes, it's awesome and great nods to Karl Lagerfeld. I think they did it, but without Tom Brown losing who he was. So that's just my thing. But hooray for Danny Rick! Love, love, love to see it. A couple years, Lewis Hamilton was there. He bought a whole table, brought some young black designers for his table. Um, so hopefully there'll be more of them. I mean, we've got some real style people like Zhou Guan Yu. He has mega style. Like, would love to see him at the Met Gala one of these years. Yuki even has great style. So I would love to see that. I wanted to bring up Patrick Mahomes because Patrick Mahomes and his wife was also at the Met Gala. They've had quite the week. Then on yesterday at the Kentucky Derby, he was there and he did the Riders Up moment. So there's a point, if you haven't watched the Kentucky Derby, where in the paddock, um, they have a little, somebody usually announces it and they say Riders Up, and the jockeys get on the horses and they head out to the track. So then they were there. And today he and his wife were at Miami for the race. Like, seriously, living my life. Living my life. And I'll see Patrick Mahomes in July. He's always at a golf tournament that I go to. And so I'm super excited about that. So there was that happening.
Well,
And
speaking of golf tournaments, we've got the like one of the drivers going to on the golf tournaments.
Carlos is going to
Oh
play
yeah,
Augusta.
yeah.
Carlos is going to Augusta. Yeah, I think that's pretty dang exciting. He's a big golfer. A lot of them are Orlando and bunch of them. But anyways, so apparently tomorrow he's going to Augusta. So I'm hoping to see some photos. My son was there for the Masters. Um, gosh, when was that? Just last month? My goodness. So that's insane. And then also, Charles is coming out with a new single. He announced this week that he's coming out with a new one. It's called MIA 23 or Miami 23. And I don't know if that's coming out tomorrow or Tuesday, but I will be scouring my Apple Music and looking for that. For that. And I'll probably make us play it next week because there's no race next week. So we have a week off. And then we start a triple header, which ends with, guess what? The Barcelona race, which Claire and I will be at. So we're so excited. So we'll have 1 week off to prepare, and then we've got 3 weeks, all Europe. So we got Imola, Monaco, and then Barcelona.
So excited. And then we're gonna work on, unless something crazy happens between now and next week that we just have too much to do, we are going to work on a team spotlight for Mercedes.
Yes, we've talked about that. We just hadn't gotten around to it. So we're going to work on that. We're talking about we're throwing around some ideas for the Beyond the Grid. So if you're new, usually on the off weeks, we like to do something that's kind of like a learning time because we know there's a lot of people that are new to the sport, and it's good for all of us to learn together. So we're looking at a few different things. There's a lot of French words that Claire has noticed pop up in F1. So we might talk about that. We might talk about what the different colored flags mean, which when we go to the race, Claire, you'll see them. And I know when I was in Austin, I was like, wait, what is that color flag? I don't know what
I even saw, like I was telling you, I saw like the blue flag come out during one of the practices. I'm like, wait, what is that? So
blue means get out of the way. but there's other ones. There's other colors too, and it's like, well, what does that flag mean? So we have some things we'll cook up this week. But yeah, we'll
have definitely. We keep originally started targeting like 43 to 45 minutes, and we fit another hour and 5. So I guess we should.
Woo! I love it.
Great to see you. Great to see Miami. I guess it was good, even though it was kind of boring-ish, not having any yellows or red bucket. It was good. There was no wrecks. There was no damage. It was a good race. It was a good race.
I'm not mad at the race at all.
Alonso got podium, so I'm happy.
Yes, we're back to our 3 that we've had at the first 3 races.
Yeah.
So it was Max, Checo, and Alonso. We're back to that. So
Alonso got another podium, so I'm happy. That's good. All right. Well, I guess we'll sign off. We'll see everyone. Thanks for coming along on the ride, and we'll see you guys next week.
See you next week. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and a review. To stay up to date with She Loves the Grid and get all the behind-the-scenes content, you can follow us on Instagram at She Loves the Grid and on Facebook at facebook.com/She Loves the Grid. Thank you for joining us for the ride this week.